Welcome to Empire Love Story channel.
Welcome to Empire Love Stories.
They say you should never bite the hand that feeds you. But Matthew Ryan didn't just bite it. He tried to sever it completely. He stood in the penthouse of the Plaza Hotel, swirling a glass of 50-year-old scotch, and looked his mistress in the eye. He told her with a cruel smile, "Don't worry, Jessica. The divorce papers are ready. By midnight, my boring, plain little wife will be a memory, and you'll be on my arm." He thought he held all the cards. He didn't know that the boring woman waiting at home didn't just have a trust fund. She carried a bloodline that could dismantle his entire empire with a single phone call. This is the story of a man who traded a queen for a pawn and lost the game before he even realized he was playing. The rain in Manhattan didn't wash away the grime. It just made the city sick and treacherous, much like Matthew Ryan himself. Standing at the floor-to-ceiling window of the executive suite at the Pierre Hotel, Matthew adjusted his bespoke Brioni cufflink. He was 42, handsome in a shark-like way, with graying temples that tested well with investors. He was the CEO of Ryan Global, a logistics conglomerate that had seen a meteoric rise in the last 5 years. Most people attributed that success to Matthew's ruthless business acumen. Only Matthew knew the company was currently bleeding cash. He needed a miracle or a merger to survive the quarter. But tonight, business wasn't on his mind. Pleasure was. "Stop pacing, Matthew. You're making me dizzy." A sultry voice purred from the velvet chaise lounge behind him. Jessica Vance, his 26-year-old director of marketing, stretched like a cat. She was everything his wife wasn't: loud, demanding, vibrantly sexual, and obsessed with status. She wore a silk robe that cost more than most people's cars, sipping champagne that Matthew had charged to the corporate account. "I'm not pacing," Matthew lied, turning to face her. "I'm thinking. About her." Jessica rolled her eyes, setting the glass down with a sharp clink. "You promised Matthew. You said by the winter solstice gala she'd be gone. That's 2 days away." Matthew sighed, walking over to pour himself a drink. "It's handled, Jess. I've already had Julian draw up the papers. I'm serving her the night of the gala." Jessica sat up, her eyes widening. "At the gala, in front of everyone, isn't that a bit brutal?" "It's necessary," Matthew said, his voice devoid of warmth. "Camilla is difficult in her own silent way. If I do it privately, she'll cry, she'll beg, she'll drag it out. If I do it at the gala, she'll be too humiliated to make a scene. She'll sign just to escape the room. It's a tactical strike." He believed this. To Matthew, his wife, Camilla, was a non-entity. She was the woman he had married 10 years ago, when he was just a mid-level manager, and she was an archivist at the New York Public Library. She was quiet, dressed in muted colors, and despised the spotlight. She was the anchor that had kept him steady, but now that he was a yacht, he felt she was just dead weight. "She's just so beige." Jessica laughed cruelly. "I saw her at the charity luncheon last week. She was wearing this hideous antique brooch. It looked like something dragged out of a coffin. Who wears oxidized silver to a Waldorf event?" Matthew chuckled, joining in the mockery. "That's Camilla. Stuck in the past. She refuses to wear the diamonds I buy her. Says they lack history. She's obsessed with her family's old junk. Honestly, Jess, I'm doing her a favor. She doesn't belong in this world. She belongs in a dusty library." Jessica stood up and wrapped her arms around his neck, smelling of expensive vanilla and ambition. "And I belong right here, on your arm. Imagine the press, Matthew. We'll be the power couple of the decade." We will, Matthew promised, kissing her deeply. Just wait 48 hours. Once I secure the investment from the Swiss delegation at the gala. I'll drop the papers. Ryan Global will be secure, and I'll be free. He checked his Rolex, a Submariner, that Camilla had given him for their 5th anniversary. He planned to replace it the moment the divorce was final. I have to go, Matthew said, pulling away. I have to play the part of the dutiful husband one last time. As he left the hotel suite, stepping out into the cold New York night, he felt invincible. He had no idea that the hideous antique brooch Jessica had mocked was older than the concept of the United States, and that the woman wearing it was currently reviewing his financial records with the precision of a forensic executioner. The Ryan residence was a sprawling townhouse on the Upper East Side, a place of cold marble and modern art that Matthew had chosen. It lacked warmth, which suited the current state of their marriage perfectly. When Matthew entered, the house was silent. He found Camilla in the solarium, a glass room at the back of the house overlooking a manicured garden. She was sitting in a high-backed leather chair, reading a leather-bound book. A cup of tea, long gone cold, sat on the table beside her. Camilla Ryan did not look like a woman of power. She was petite, with pale skin and dark hair pulled back into a severe, simple bun. She wore a grey cashmere cardigan and no makeup. When she looked up at Matthew, her eyes, a striking, unusual shade of violet blue, were unreadable. "You're late," she said softly. It wasn't an accusation, merely an observation. Board meeting ran long. Matthew lied effortlessly, loosening his tie. Crisis management with the logistics team in Hamburg. Camilla closed her book gently. Matthew noticed the title embossed in gold leaf, The Treaty of Westphalia and the Sovereign Debt of Nations. Light reading, he scoffed internally. "Did you eat?" she asked. "I grabbed something at the office," he said, walking past her to the liquor cabinet. He didn't want to look at her. Her calmness always unnerved him. He preferred Jessica's fire. He understood fire. He didn't understand the deep, still ocean that was Camilla. "Are you ready for the gala on Saturday?" "I suppose," Camilla said, her fingers tracing the cover of her book. "Matthew, are we okay?" The question made him pause. He poured a drink to hide his smirk. "We are about to be over," he thought. "We're fine, Camilla. Why do you ask? You've been distant," she said, her voice steady. "And there have been withdrawals, large ones, from the joint operating account." Matthew froze. He spun around, anger flaring. "I told you I'm expanding the fleet. I need liquidity. Don't start acting like an accountant, Camilla. You're a librarian." "I was an archivist," she corrected him gently, "and I just worry. Ryan Global's debt-to-equity ratio is becoming precarious. If the Swiss deal doesn't go through, the Swiss deal is a lock." Matthew snapped his voice, echoing off the glass walls. "God, can you just support me for once, instead of analyzing everything to death? This is why I can't bring you anywhere. You suck the energy out of the room." He expected her to flinch. She usually did. But tonight, Camilla didn't flinch. She just looked at him with those violet eyes, a strange expression on her face. It wasn't fear. It looked almost like pity. "I only want what is best for you, Matthew," she said. "I made a vow." "Yeah, well, vows change," he muttered, downing his drink. "Wear something decent on Saturday. Not that old rags you usually wear. And for God's sake, leave that ugly ring in the safe." He pointed to her left hand. On her pinky finger, she wore a heavy signet-style ring. It was black onyx, engraved with a crest that was worn down by centuries of use. A griffin holding a key set against a shield. Camilla covered the ring with her other hand, a protective gesture. "This ring has been in my mother's family for 600 years, Matthew." "It looks like a prize from a Cracker Jack box," he sneered. "By a diamond. Look like a CEO's wife, not a widow." He stormed out of the room, heading upstairs to the master bedroom he rarely slept in anymore. Camilla sat alone in the silence. She looked down at the ring. She twisted it once, then twice. 600 years, she whispered to the empty room. "And we have survived wars, plagues, and revolutions. I suppose we can survive a narcissist." She picked up her phone and dialed a number. It was an international call. "Ja," a deep voice answered instantly. "Heinrich," Camilla said, her voice shifting from the soft American accent to a crisp, commanding high German. "The audit is complete. Prepare the delegation. He plans to move on Saturday." "Understood, Your Highness," the voice replied. "Shall we initiate the protocol?" "Not yet," Camilla said, her eyes hardening. "Let him have his gala. Let him climb to the very top of the mountain. It will make the fall that much more definitive." The grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Museum of Art was transformed into a winter wonderland. White roses, crystal chandeliers, and blue lighting created an atmosphere of icy opulence. This was the social event of the season, the Ryan Global Winter Solstice Gala. Matthew stood at the entrance greeting senators, tech moguls, and hedge fund managers. He looked every inch the titan of industry in his custom tuxedo. Beside him, Camilla stood quietly in a deep navy velvet gown. It was elegant but conservative, high neck, long sleeves. She looked regal, but in Matthew's eyes she looked invisible. "Smile," Matthew hissed through his teeth as cameras flashed. "You look like you're at a funeral." "Perhaps I am," Camilla murmured, though Matthew didn't hear her over the roar of the crowd. The tension in the air was palpable to anyone paying attention. Jessica Vance had arrived. She hadn't entered with Matthew, but she made sure her presence was felt. She wore a scarlet dress that was cut down to her navel and slit up to her hip. It was a dress designed to scream mistress. She moved through the crowd, laughing too loudly, touching the arms of board members, her eyes constantly darting toward Matthew. "Who is that?" a senator's wife whispered to Camilla. "She seems spirited." "That is my husband's director of marketing," Camilla said politely. "She is very hands-on." Matthew excused himself from Camilla's side, claiming he needed to speak to the catering manager. In reality, he grabbed Jessica's arm and pulled her into the shadow of the Temple of Dendur exhibit. "Are you insane?" Matthew whispered. His face flushed. "That dress, you're practically naked." "I'm celebrating." Jessica smirked, running a hand down his lapel. "It's almost midnight, Matthew. Have you done it yet?" "Not yet. The Swiss delegation is arriving in 20 minutes. I need to sign the deal first. If I serve her papers before I get the money, she might freeze the joint accounts out of Citi. I need that capital secured." "You're stalling," Jessica pouted. "I'm strategizing," Matthew snapped. "Look, go to the bar. Keep the CFO distracted. Once I sign with the Swiss, I'll take Camilla to the VIP lounge and give her the envelope. Then I'll announce you as my partner for the new year. Promise. I promise. She's history, Jess. She just doesn't know it yet." Unbeknownst to them, a waiter standing near a sandstone pillar had paused, holding a tray of champagne. He wasn't looking at them, but his earpiece crackled. "Target confirmed. He intends to execute the separation post-signature, the waiter murmured into his lapel. Across the room, Camilla was standing alone by the champagne tower. She touched her earpiece, hidden beneath her hair. Understood. Let the Swiss delegation through. It's time to introduce Matthew to the real world. Suddenly, the massive double doors of the ballroom swung open. The music stopped. A hush fell over the crowd. Usually guests arrived one by one, but this was a procession. 6 men in immaculate dark suits walked in, forming a V formation. They didn't look like bankers. They looked like the Secret Service. In the center of the formation walked a tall, older man with silver hair and a monocle, carrying a briefcase made of leather so dark it looked like obsidian. Matthew's eyes lit up. The Swiss. This was it. The Sovereign Bank of Geneva. The injection of $500 million that would save his company and fund his new life with Jessica. He straightened his tie and practically ran to the center of the room to greet them. Herr Vanderberg, Matthew boomed, extending his hand. Welcome, I am so honored you could join us. The older man, Vanderberg, did not take Matthew's hand. He looked at Matthew with cold, grey eyes. Mr. Ryan, we are not here for the festivities. Of course. Strictly business. Matthew laughed nervously, dropping his hand. We can go to the private study. I have the papers ready for the liquidity injection. We are not here to give you money, Mr. Ryan, Vanderberg said, his voice projecting across the silent room. We are here to call in your debts. Matthew froze. The crowd murmured. I beg your pardon. The term sheet. We agreed. The term sheet was contingent on the stability of your primary guarantor, Vanderberg said. He stepped aside. Behind him, walking slowly through the parted crowd, came Camilla. She wasn't looking at the floor anymore. Her head was high. She walked with a fluid, predatory grace that Matthew had never seen before. As she approached the group, the 6 bodyguards, men who looked like they could kill with a pencil, bowed their heads in perfect unison. Snap, snap, snap. The heels of Camilla's shoes clicked on the marble floor, echoing like gunshots. Camilla, Matthew stammered, confused. What are you doing? Go back to the table. This is business. Camilla stopped 3 feet from him. She looked at Vanderberg. Is the ledger prepared, Heinrich? She asked. Your Highness, Vanderberg replied, opening the obsidian briefcase. Your... What? Matthew laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. Highness, what is going on? Camilla, tell these actors to leave. Camilla finally looked at Matthew. Her eyes were cold fire. She reached up and slowly pulled the pins from her hair, letting the dark locks cascade down her back. She looked younger, fiercer, and infinitely more dangerous. You wanted to replace me, Matthew, Camilla said, her voice ringing clear and authoritative, shedding the meek persona like a snake shedding skin. You told your mistress you would replace me tonight. I thought I would save you the trouble. She held out her hand. Vanderberg placed a document in it. This is the deed to Ryan Global, Camilla said, or rather what's left of it. Matthew felt the blood drain from his face. Jessica, watching from the sidelines, dropped her champagne glass. It shattered, but no one looked. All eyes were on the plain wife, who had suddenly become the center of gravity. The sound of Jessica's shattered champagne flute seemed to hang in the air for an eternity, a sharp punctuation mark in a sentence that Matthew couldn't bear to read. For 10 seconds, no one moved. The tuxedoed waiters, the billionaire investors, the socialites in their silk gowns. They were all frozen tableaus of shock. The only thing moving was the color draining from Matthew Ryan's face. He looked from the document in his wife's hand to the stoic face of Heinrich Vanderberg, and finally to Camilla. He tried to laugh again, but it came out as a wet, ragged cough. This is absurd," Matthew stammered, though his voice lacked its usual baritone command. He looked around the room, seeking an ally, seeking eye contact with anyone who would share in his incredulity. But the crowd was like a pack of wolves sensing a wounded animal. They were silent, watching, waiting for the blood. "Camilla, you've hired actors, is that it? Is this some sort of twisted revenge for the arguments we've been having?" He took a step toward her, reaching for her arm, a gesture of dominance he had used 1,000 times before. "Come on, you're making a scene. We're going home." Before his fingers could graze the velvet of her sleeve, a hand made of iron clamped onto his wrist. One of the bodyguards, a man with a scar running through his eyebrow, had moved with a speed that blurred the eye. He didn't twist Matthew's arm. He simply held it, immobile, like a vice. Matthew pulled, but he was anchored. "Release him, Kyle," Camilla said softly. The bodyguard released Matthew instantly, stepping back into formation. Matthew rubbed his wrist, staring at the man in horror. This wasn't an actor. Actors didn't have grip strength that could crush bone. "You want to go home, Matthew?" Camilla asked, her voice low, carrying across the room without the need for a microphone. "Which home?" "The townhouse on 64th Street. The summer estate in the Hamptons. The penthouse you've been renting under the corporate shell company for your private meetings." She took a slow step forward, her heels clicking rhythmically. "You can't go to any of those places," she said, her tone devoid of malice, which made it all the more terrifying. It was the tone of a judge delivering a sentence. "Because you don't own them. You never did. I built this company." Matthew roared, his humiliation finally igniting into rage. He pointed a shaking finger at the ceiling. "Ryan Global is my name. I built the logistics network. I signed the contracts. You signed the papers, yes?" Vanderberg interrupted, his German accent crisp and cutting. "But who capitalized the venture? Mr. Ryan, who provided the initial $20 million when the banks laughed you out of the room 5 years ago." Matthew blinked. The Orion Group, a private equity firm in Zurich. "And who is the sole beneficiary of the Orion Group?" Vanderberg asked. Matthew opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't know. He had never asked. He had been so desperate for the cash, so arrogant in his belief that he was a genius attracting investors, that he had never looked behind the curtain. Vanderberg gestured to Camilla. Camilla lifted her left hand, displaying the ugly black onyx ring Matthew had despised for a decade. She held it up to the light. "Look closely, Matthew," she said. Matthew squinted. He had seen the ring 1,000 times, dismissing it as junk. But now, under the intense lights of the museum chandeliers, he saw the details he had ignored. The griffin, the key, the shield. "This isn't just jewelry," Camilla explained, her voice taking on a historical cadence, like a teacher instructing a slow child. "This is the signet of the House of Valois Königsthal. My mother wasn't just a librarian, Matthew. She was the Grand Duchess of Königsthal, a principality that dissolved its borders in 1918, but kept its vaults very much intact." A gasp went through the room. The whispers started immediately. Valois Königsthal. The banking dynasty. The ones who financed the rail lines in the 1800s. The Orion Group, Camilla continued, is an acronym. Our Royal Investment Operations Network. It is my family's private trust. She took another step closer to him. Matthew retreated his back, hitting the edge of the champagne table. "I funded you, Matthew," she whispered, close enough that only he and the front row could hear. "I saw a man with ambition and no means. I thought if I gave him wings he would fly. I thought you were a partner. I loved you, so I used my inheritance to build your pedestal." She reached out and straightened his bow tie, a gesture that was mocking in its intimacy. "But you didn't build an empire," she said sadly. "You built a playground for your ego, and you used my money to fund your vices." She turned her gaze slowly, deliberately toward the shadows of the Egyptian temple where Jessica Vance was trying to shrink into the sandstone. "Jessica," Camilla called out. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Jessica Vance, usually so confident, looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. She clutched her purse, her knuckles white. "Come here, please," Camilla commanded. Jessica didn't want to move, but the social pressure was crushing. She walked forward, her legs shaking in her high heels. She stood next to Matthew, but she didn't look at him. She looked at the floor. "You told my husband that I was boring," Camilla said, her voice smooth. "You told him my jewelry lacked history. You told him I belonged in a dusty library." Camilla reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded piece of velvet. She unfolded it to reveal a stunning heavy necklace made of diamonds and sapphire stones, so large they looked fake. But the fire within them proved their authenticity. "This is the Königsthal sapphire," Camilla said. "It was worn by my great-grandmother at the coronation of Queen Victoria. It has more history in a single facet than your entire lineage." She didn't put it on. She just placed it on the table next to Matthew, dismissing it as if it were a trinket. "You wanted to replace me," Camilla said to Jessica. "You wanted the lifestyle, the penthouse, the corporate card." Camilla turned back to Vanderberg. "Heinrich, what is the current status of the Ryan Global Operating Account?" Vanderberg opened a folder. "As of 9:00 a.m. this morning, per your instruction as the primary lien holder, we have exercised the bad actor clause in the lending agreement." "Which means," Camilla asked, "which means all assets have been frozen," Vanderberg announced to the room. "The corporate accounts are locked. The company credit cards have been deactivated. The lease on the penthouse at the plaza has been terminated effective immediately." Camilla looked at Jessica. "I hope you brought your own cab fare, Jessica. The company Uber account won't work anymore." Jessica let out a small sob. She looked at Matthew with pure venom. "You said you had the money," she hissed at him. "You said you controlled the board." "I am the board," Matthew shouted, finally snapping. He grabbed a bottle of champagne from the table and hurled it at the floor. It shattered foam, exploding over his patent leather shoes. "You can't do this, Camilla. We have marital laws. Half of this is mine. New York is an equitable distribution state." Camilla smiled. It was a small, sad smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Matthew," she sighed. "You really should have read the prenuptial agreement you signed. You were so eager to marry me, so eager to lock down the safe girl, that you didn't even have a lawyer look at it." "I signed a standard prenup," Matthew yelled. "No," Camilla corrected. "You signed a royal charter of asset protection. It stipulates that in the event of infidelity, proven by, say, private investigator photos of you and your marketing director entering the Pierre Hotel every Tuesday for the last 6 months, you forfeit all claims to the Königsthal assets." She signaled to one of the bodyguards who produced a thick manila envelope. Camilla tossed it at Matthew's feet. "The photos," she said, "and the divorce papers. You wanted to serve me tonight. I beat you to it." Matthew looked down at the envelope. He looked at Jessica, who was backing away from him as if he were contagious. He looked at the Swiss bankers, who regarded him with absolute disdain. He realized with a sickening jolt that he wasn't a CEO anymore. He wasn't a tycoon. He was just a man in a rented tuxedo, standing in a puddle of champagne, unemployed and penniless. But Matthew Ryan was a narcissist, and narcissists do not go down quietly. He straightened his jacket, wiping the sweat from his upper lip. A dark, desperate look entered his eyes. "You think you can destroy me?" He sneered, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. "You think you can just walk in here and take everything I know, thinks Camilla. I know where the bodies are buried in this company. If I go down, I'm taking the stock price to zero. I'll tell the press everything about your royal family. I'll turn you into a tabloid circus." He thought he had played an ace. He thought the threat of exposure would make her flinch. Camilla didn't flinch. She laughed, a genuine, rich laugh that echoed off the high ceilings. "The stock price?" she asked, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. "Matthew, you haven't checked your phone in the last hour, have you?" Matthew patted his pocket. He pulled out his phone. The screen was lit up with notifications, hundreds of them. "Open the Market app," Camilla instructed. Matthew unlocked his phone. His thumb hovered over the icon. He tapped it. He stared at the screen. His mouth fell open. "Zero," he whispered. "Ryan Global is a private entity," Camilla said, her voice turning hard as steel. "Orion Group owned 51% of the shares. I owned 51% of the shares. An hour ago, I initiated a hostile buyback of the remaining public float, and then I dissolved the company." You dissolved it?" Matthew gasped. "But that's billions of dollars. You just burned it." "I didn't burn it," Camilla said calmly. "I absorbed it. The logistics network, the trucks, the warehouses. They have all been transferred to a holding company owned by the Königsthal Trust. The only thing that was dissolved, Matthew, was your job. And your reputation." She stepped closer, her face inches from his. "I would rather burn $1 billion to ash than let a traitor spend a single cent of it." She turned her back on him, the heavy velvet of her dress swirling around her. "Heinrich," she said, "have security escort Mr. Ryan and Miss Vance off the premises. They are trespassing on a private event." "Private?" Matthew sputtered, looking around at the hundreds of guests. "This is a public gala." "Not anymore," Camilla said over her shoulder. "I just bought the museum for the night. Everyone here is my guest. Except you." As two of the massive bodyguards stepped forward, grasping Matthew by the arms, he began to scream. It wasn't a scream of fear, but of broken pride. He thrashed, shouting obscenities, blaming Jessica, blaming Camilla, blaming the world. Jessica Vance didn't scream. She simply wept, her mascara running down her face in black streaks as she was led out behind him. The clicking of her heels, a pathetic echo of her earlier entrance. Camilla watched them go. The doors slammed shut, cutting off Matthew's screams. The room was silent again. Camilla stood alone in the center of the ballroom. She looked at the crowd, at the people who had ignored her for years, the people who had laughed at her outdated clothes and her quiet demeanor. She raised her chin. "Please," she said, her voice gracious and warm, the perfect hostess once more. "Do not let this unpleasantness ruin the evening. The bar is open, and I believe the orchestra knows a waltz." She signaled the conductor. The music swelled, a Strauss waltz, elegant and timeless. The guests began to clap. It started slowly, then grew into a thunderous ovation. They weren't clapping for the drama. They were clapping for the queen. But as the music played, Camilla didn't smile. She walked over to the glass wall, looking out over Central Park. The snow was falling harder now. She had won. She had destroyed him. She had reclaimed her dignity. But as she touched the cold glass, she felt a vibration in her pocket. It wasn't her phone. It was a small, sleek pager she hadn't used in 15 years. A device that connected directly to the deeper, darker roots of the Königsthal family in Europe. She pulled it out. The screen was red. It displayed a single message: "The coin has been flipped. They know." Camilla's blood ran cold. The public dismantling of Matthew had been necessary, but it had been loud. Too loud. In revealing her identity to crush her husband, she had sent a flare up into the night sky. And something in the darkness had seen it. The adrenaline of destruction is a potent drug, but like all drugs, the come-down is brutal. Camilla sat in the back of the armored Maybach, the city lights of New York blurring into streaks of neon and grey rain against the bulletproof glass. The heated leather seat was comfortable. The suspension was silent, and the air smelled of filtered lavender. It was a cocoon of wealth, but Camilla was shivering. She held the red pager in her hand, her thumb tracing the screen where the words, "The coin has been flipped," still glowed in ominous crimson pixels. It was old technology analog, untraceable, a relic from a time before smartphones and GPS. A relic from the time when her father was hunted across Europe. "Heinrich," she whispered. Her voice, usually so steady, trembled just enough to be audible in the quiet cabin. "I saw it, Your Highness," Heinrich replied from the front passenger seat. He didn't turn around. He was watching the side mirrors, his eyes scanning every headlight that trailed them on Fifth Avenue. "We are not going back to the townhouse." "No," Camilla agreed, staring at her reflection in the window. The Königsthal sapphire lay heavy around her neck, a cold noose of diamonds. "The townhouse is a glass box. If they know, if the syndicate knows I am active, a glass box is a coffin." "We are rerouting to the safe house in the meat-packing district," Heinrich said. "Protocol 7, no electronic footprints." Camilla nodded, leaning her head back. She closed her eyes, and the image of Matthew's ruined face flashed in her mind. She had wanted to hurt him. She had wanted to crush his ego to show him that the boring wife he despised was a giant he was too small to comprehend. But in her rage, she had been reckless. For 10 years, Camilla had been Camilla Ryan, a librarian, a nobody. That anonymity was her armor. It protected her not from poverty, but from the wolves that had torn her family apart in 1998. By standing in that ballroom, by declaring her heritage and wielding the power of the Königsthal Trust, she had lit a bonfire in a dark forest. Now the monsters were coming to investigate the light. The descent of Matthew, miles away in a grime-streaked alley behind a dive bar in Hell's Kitchen. Matthew Ryan was vomiting onto his own patent leather shoes. The rain was freezing, soaking through his tuxedo, turning the fine wool into a heavy, wet shroud. He had been thrown out of the museum by security, literally thrown onto the sidewalk. He had walked for blocks, dazed until the adrenaline crashed and the alcohol took over. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. His Rolex was still on his wrist, but his wallet was gone, left in his coat check, which he hadn't been allowed to retrieve. His phone was dead. "Ruined," he muttered to the brick wall. "She ruined me." He kicked a trash can, sending it clattering into a puddle. "That bitch! That lying, manipulative, quiet little witch." He wasn't thinking about the years of emotional neglect he had inflicted on her. He wasn't thinking about Jessica, who had abandoned him the moment the security guards grabbed him, hopping into a taxi without a backward glance. He was thinking only of his own fall. He was a victim in his own mind. "Rough night, mate." The voice was smooth-accented and out of place in the dirty alley. Matthew spun around, swaying slightly. Standing at the mouth of the alley, silhouetted against the streetlights, was a figure holding a black umbrella. "Piss off," Matthew slurred. "I don't have any money." "I know," the man said. He stepped forward. He was dressed in a long charcoal trench coat. He was handsome, but in a sharp, geometric way. High cheekbones, pale eyes, and a mouth that looked like it had never smiled. I saw the news. The live streams from the gala are trending globally. The fall of the Ryan. Very dramatic. Matthew bristled. "You want an autograph? Get lost." "I don't want an autograph," the stranger said, closing the umbrella as he stepped under the shelter of the fire escape. "I want to offer you a job." Matthew laughed, a bitter barking sound. "A job? Who are you?" "A recruiter for Uber. I used to run a logistics empire." "Used to," the man corrected gently. "Now you are a man with a very specific set of grievances and intimate knowledge of a woman named Camilla." The mention of her name sobered Matthew instantly. He narrowed his eyes. "You know Camilla." "I know who she was," the man said, "and I know who she is trying to be. My employers, let's call them interested parties, from the old world, have been looking for the heir to the Königstal key for a very long time. We thought the line died out. We thought the fire in '98 finished the job. But tonight, she stepped out of the ashes." The stranger reached into his coat and pulled out a silver cigarette case. He offered one to Matthew. "My name is Julian Vesper," the man said, "and I represent the people your wife has been hiding from." Matthew hesitated, then took the cigarette. Vesper lit it with a gold lighter. "Why are you talking to me?" Matthew asked, inhaling the smoke. It tasted immensive. "Because Mr. Ryan—" Vesper smiled, and it was a terrifying expression. "You are the only person alive who has lived in her house for 10 years. You know her habits. You know her weaknesses. You know where she goes when she is scared." "She's not scared of anything," Matthew spat. "She just dissolved a billion-dollar company like it was nothing." "Oh, she is scared," Vesper corrected. "Why do you think she pretended to be a nobody for a decade?" "She is terrified. And she should be." Vesper stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Help us find her, Matthew. Help us retrieve what she stole from our families 70 years ago. And in return, we will give you back your life, the company, the money, the reputation. We will make you a king if you help us catch the Queen." Matthew looked at the cigarette burning in his hand. He thought of Camilla's cold face as she humiliated him. He thought of the laughter of the crowd. "What do I have to do?" Matthew asked. The safe house. The safe house was not what one would expect. It wasn't a bunker. It was a loft in an old meat-packing warehouse on the west side, accessible only by a freight elevator that required a retinal scan and a physical key to operate. Camilla sat on a velvet sofa in the center of the dark industrial space. The walls were exposed brick covered in tapestries that looked medieval. The windows were shuttered with steel plates. Heinrich was pacing, speaking rapidly into a secure satellite phone in German. Camilla had removed the sapphire necklace. It sat on the coffee table, glittering in the dim light of a single floor lamp. She poured herself a glass of brandy, her hands finally shaking uncontrollably. "They found the signal," Heinrich said, ending the call and turning to her. "The pager activation triangulated to the gala. We have to assume the syndicate has eyes in New York." "They always have eyes in New York, Heinrich." Camilla sighed. "Who is the operative?" "Intel suggests Julian Vesper is in the city," Heinrich said grimly. Camilla's glass paused halfway to her lips. "Vesper, the Hound." "The very same." Camilla closed her eyes. Julian Vesper was a legend in the black market circles of Europe. He was a recovery agent for the fallen aristocracies, the families that had lost their power but kept their greed. He didn't just find people, he dismantled them. "He will come for the ring," Camilla said softly, looking at her hand. "The signet ring contains the access codes to the Swiss vaults. That's all they ever wanted." "We should move the assets," Heinrich suggested. "Transfer the funds to the Caymans, dissolve the trust." "No." Camilla snapped her eyes opening. The fear was there, but the steel was returning. "That is what my father did. He ran. He hid money. And they killed him for it. I spent 10 years hiding Heinrich. I spent 10 years washing Matthew's socks and listening to him belittle me just to stay invisible. I am done hiding." She stood up, the brandy sloshing in her glass. "I made a mistake tonight," she admitted. "I let my pride dictate my actions. I exposed us. But now that the mask is off, I will not put it back on." "What are you proposing, Your Highness?" "If Vesper is here, he will try to find leverage," Camilla reasoned. "He can't just storm a fortress. He needs a way in. He needs a key." She walked over to the window, peering through a slit in the steel shutters. "He will go for Matthew," she said with sudden certainty. Heinrich frowned. "Mr. Ryan. He is useless. You stripped him of everything. He is a drunkard and a fool." "Exactly." Camilla turned her expression dark. "He is a desperate, angry fool who knows my face, knows my voice, and knows the layout of this city. And he hates me. Vesper loves men like Matthew. He feeds on them." "If Vesper turns Matthew," Heinrich trailed off, "then Matthew becomes a weapon," Camilla finished. "He knows about the summer house in Newport. He knows about the safe deposit box at Chase. He knows enough to lead them to the breadcrumbs." Camilla set the glass down with a hard clink. "We need to get to Matthew before Vesper digs his claws in too deep," she commanded. "Or, if he already has, we need to neutralize the threat." Heinrich stiffened. "Neutralize, ma'am?" "You are speaking of your husband." "Ex-husband," Camilla corrected. "And I am not speaking of murder, Heinrich. I am speaking of leverage. We need to find him, now." "I will activate the tracking on his car," Heinrich said. "His car is impounded," Camilla said. "Track his watch." Heinrich looked confused. "His watch, the Rolex. I gave him that Submariner for our 5th anniversary," Camilla said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "Did you really think I would give a man like Matthew a gift without an insurance policy? There is a passive GPS chip in the bezel. I wanted to know if he was cheating. Now I just want to know if he is betraying me to an executioner." Heinrich typed rapidly on his tablet. A map of Manhattan appeared on the screen. A small red dot was blinking. "He is in Hell's Kitchen," Heinrich said, "moving north, slowly. He is in a vehicle." Camilla walked over and looked at the screen. The dot was moving toward the Upper West Side, toward the location of the one safe house her father had built in the 1980s, The one place Matthew knew about, because she had foolishly taken him there, once calling it an uncle's apartment. He's not going home. Camilla realized, her blood running cold. He's leading them to the archive. The archive. Heinrich paled. The physical ledgers are there. If Vesper gets the ledgers, he gets the names of every ally we have left in Europe. Camilla finished. He can hunt down the entire family tree. She grabbed her coat. Load the car, Heinrich. She ordered, her voice transforming into the icy command of a matriarch. And bring the heavy case. The one we haven't opened since Berlin. Heinrich nodded solemnity. The HK-46 and the flash bangs, Camilla said, checking the chamber of a small silver pistol she pulled from her purse. Matthew wants a war. He's about to find out that logistics isn't the only thing I know how to organize. She strode toward the elevator, the long train of her velvet gown trailing behind her like a shadow. Tonight we stop running, she whispered. Tonight, the griffin hunts. The interior of Julian Vesper's sedan was silent, save for the rhythmic thrum-thrum of the windshield wipers battling the relentless New York downpour. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that presses against the eardrums. Matthew sat in the passenger seat, his damp tuxedo smelling of stale champagne and rain. He stared out at the blurred city, clutching the door handle as if he could jump out at any moment. But he wouldn't jump. He was too angry, too desperate, and far too cowardly to face the cold alone. You are shaking, Mr. Ryan, Vesper observed. He wasn't looking at Matthew. His eyes were fixed on the slick asphalt of Columbus Avenue. His driving was terrifyingly precise, smooth, calculated, predatory. I'm cold. Matthew lied, his teeth chattering. No, Vesper corrected softly. You are realizing the magnitude of what you are about to do. You are about to sell the woman you slept beside for 10 years to a group of men who do not believe in mercy. It is a heavy thing, betrayal. It requires a certain flexibility of the soul. Matthew stiffened. She betrayed me first. He snapped, the justification rising like bile in his throat. She lied to me every single day. She pretended to be a nobody. She made me feel small. She stood there tonight and laughed while I lost everything. And so, Vesper purred, turning the wheel to merge onto Central Park West. You seek balance. An eye for an eye, or rather a kingdom for a career. The car slowed as they approached a looming pre-war building on West 72nd Street. It was a fortress of limestone and gargoyles, standing dark and imposing against the stormy sky. Is this it? Vesper asked. Matthew looked up at the building. He remembered the day Camilla had brought him here 3 years ago. It's just my uncle's old pied-à-terre, she had said, her voice light and airy. He keeps some old books here. I need to dust it once in a while. He had waited in the lobby, bored, checking emails on his phone while she went upstairs. He had never asked what books. He had never asked about the uncle. Apartment 4B, Matthew whispered. She calls it the library. Excellent, Vesper said. He didn't park. He simply stopped the car in the middle of the street, engaging the hazard lights. After you, Mr. Ryan. Me? Matthew recoiled. You said you just needed the location. I need access, Vesper said, his voice hardening. He reached into his coat and produced a small, complex-looking pistol with a suppressor attached. It looked like a surgical instrument. The building has a doorman, a keypad. You are a known face. You are the husband. You will walk in, you will smile at the night porter, and you will take us up to 4B. If you hesitate, or if you try to run, Well, the rain washes away blood very quickly in this city. Matthew felt the blood drain from his face. He had wanted revenge. Yes, he had wanted his money back. He hadn't signed up for this visceral reality of guns and wet pavement. But looking into Vesper's dead, shark-like eyes, he knew there was no going back. He opened the car door and stepped out into the freezing rain. Three blocks south, the armored Maybach tore through a red light, the engine roaring like a trapped beast. "He's stopped," Heinrich shouted from the front seat, the tablet glowing blue on his lap. "The signal is stationary. West 72nd, the Ardsley building." Camilla sat in the back, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. She had stripped off the velvet gloves of the gala. In her lap lay the HK-416 carbine, compact and lethal. She checked the magazine, tapped it into place, and pulled the charging handle. Click-clack. The sound was mechanical, cold, and final. "The archive." Camilla breathed a look of pure horror crossing her face. "He's taking them to the archive." "If they breach the safe room," Heinrich warned. "I know," Camilla cut him off. "The ledger contains the coordinates of the remaining gold reserves. It contains the names of the children of the House of Valois. If Vesper gets that book, he doesn't just destroy me. He destroys the future." She looked out the window. The city she had tried to make her home was now a battlefield. "Ram the entrance." Camilla ordered, her voice devoid of fear. "Ma'am." "You heard me, Heinrich. We don't have time for finesse. Vesper is already inside. If Matthew opens that door, the protocol is breached. Drive this car through the front doors if you have to. We are not letting them leave with that book." Camilla gripped the door handle. She thought of Matthew, the man she had cooked dinner for, the man she had nursed through the flu, the man she had quietly loved despite his flaws. "You fool," she thought, a single tear tracing a hot path down her cheek before she wiped it away. "You poor, greedy fool. You have no idea what you've just unlocked." 2 minutes out," Heinrich announced, flooring the accelerator. Camilla looked down at the sapphire necklace still resting on the seat beside her. The griffin crest seemed to stare back. "God save the king," she whispered bitterly, "because the Queen is coming for his head." The door to apartment 4B didn't creak. It opened with the heavy, oiled silence of a bank vault. Matthew stood on the threshold, his hand trembling on the key. Inside, the air smelled of beeswax, old vellum, and ozone. It wasn't an apartment. It was a mausoleum of information. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined every wall, filled not with novels, but with leather-bound ledgers dating back to the 18th century. "Beautiful," Julian Vesper whispered, pushing past Matthew. The memory of Europe rotting in a pre-war walk-up. Vesper holstered his pistol, confident in his victory. He walked straight to a podium in the center of the room, where a single thick book rested on a velvet cushion. The cover was crimson leather embossed with the griffin. The red ledger. Vesper murmured, his fingers hovering over it. The names of every illegitimate child, every hidden account, every bribe paid by the House of Valois since 1918. This is leverage over half the governments in the G7. Matthew stood by the door, water dripping from his tuxedo onto the Persian rug. "You have what you want," he stammered. "Now, the deal, my company, my reputation. You promised." Vesper laughed. He didn't turn around. He picked up the book. "Matthew." Vesper sighed. "You really are a logistics man. You see A to B. You never see the cliff in between." Vesper turned the silencer raised again, leveled directly at Matthew's chest. There is no company. There is no deal. You are a loose end. And loose ends are untidy. Matthew flinched, squeezing his eyes shut, waiting for the flash. Crash! The front door exploded inward, splintering off its hinges. Before Matthew could scream, a concussive boom shattered the air. A flashbang grenade skittered across the rug, detonating in a blinding wall of white light and deafening sound. Vesper fired blindly, the thwip-thwip of his suppressor lost in the ringing silence. But he was too slow. Through the smoke, a figure moved with terrifying precision. Camilla didn't look like a librarian anymore. She looked like an angel of death in a ruined velvet gown. She stepped through the debris, the HK-416 raised. She didn't spray bullets. She fired twice. Crack! Crack! Julian Vesper crumpled the red ledger, slipping from his fingers and hitting the floor with a heavy thud. He grasped his shoulder and his knee neutralized but alive, writhing in agony. Silence returned to the room, broken only by the wail of sirens rising from the street below. Camilla lowered the weapon. Heinrich stepped in behind her, securing Vesper, with zip ties kicking the gun away from the assassin's hand. Matthew was huddled in the corner, shaking violently, his hands over his ears. He looked up to see his wife standing over him. He expected anger. He expected her to yell, to scream, to cry. But Camilla just looked at him. Her violet eyes were completely clear. Camilla, Matthew choked out, reaching a hand toward her ankle. He forced me. I didn't want to. Please. I can explain. We can fix this. I can sign a new prenup. I can change. Camilla looked down at him, then at the red ledger on the floor. She gestured for Heinrich to pick up the book. There is nothing to fix Matthew, she said, her voice incredibly weary. You broke the seal. You let the wolves in. I'm your husband, Matthew sobbed. You can't just leave me here. The police are coming. What do I tell them? Camilla turned away, walking toward the shattered door. She paused, looking back one last time. Tell them the truth, she said. Tell them you tried to replace a wife you didn't know. Tell them you traded a diamond for a piece of glass. Tell them you messed with the House of Valois. She stepped out into the hallway. Camilla. Matthew screamed, his voice cracking. Do you hate me that much? Camilla stopped. She didn't look back. I don't hate you, Matthew, she said softly. I don't feel anything for you at all. You are just a bad investment, I finally wrote off. She disappeared into the stairwell, followed by her guard vanishing into the night, just as the heavy boots of the NYPD thundered up the stairs. Matthew Ryan was left alone in the ruin of the archive, kneeling in the wreckage of his own life, while the sirens outside screamed his name. In the end, Matthew Ryan learned the hardest lesson of all true power isn't about the noise you make, but the silence you keep. He spent his life chasing status, never realizing he was sleeping next to a dynasty.
So I know I'm still coughing here, but like I was coughing way worse. So this is sort of the last little bit of it. I'm still not drinking coffee. I'm trying to switch over to tea. I don't know. I had this shit the other day. I had this green tea with jasmine. Which green tea do you want? I don't know. Which one do you suggest? There, Pierce Navel. I like the jasmine. All right. All right, there, you artsy barista. I'll take the green tea with the jasmine. I gotta tell you, it wasn't bad, but it's just nowhere near as good as coffee. And this is you know what it is? This is another thing that child sense memory thing. You know where like everybody in Philly talks about cheesesteaks, and then you eat one, and you're like, this is fucking gross. Like, this is sitting in my stomach. I feel like I ate a fucking boot. This thing just sitting in here. Like, it's just a disgusting cut of meat. Most of the sandwich is bread. Same thing with, like, the steak and cheese in fucking Massachusetts. You just grew up on it, so you think it's fucking great. And then somebody comes to town and eats it just going like, that's fucking disgusting. It's beyond not healthy. In New York City, the bacon, egg, and cheese on a roll, that fucking dry-ass roll that always tastes like it's 3 days. I've never been to a deli that has a good roll. And then that angry fucking dude just murders the eggs and throws cheese on it and fucking bacon and just hands it to you in that fucking tinfoil. It's just shit food. Like, the lack... Like, the esteem that the bacon, egg, and cheese is fucking held in New York City versus the lack of caring. Like, there's no, like, you watch people make pizza or whatever, there's a fucking art to it. Bacon, egg, and cheese, the guy just fucking do the eggs, throws it on a flat top grill, throws cheese over the fucking top of it and the bacon, and then just cuts that fucking dry-ass roll, and here you go. Go fuck yourself. Enjoy your goddamn day. So I would say, like, the English, where they're like, they love their tea. I can remember the one time I went to a Premier League soccer game, Arsenal versus Everton, and there was this guy from Newcastle there. And the guy asked him if he would like something to drink. He was like, I could murder a cup of tea. I remember that. And just the way he said it made me want to have tea. I was like, this guy lives for this shit. Like, this is like starts his day. And then I like drank it. And I'm like, this just fucking tastes like ass. I can't stand it. But I would think if you grew up drinking tea, if you had a coffee, I mean, the reason why I never drank coffee my whole life is because I used to drink my dad's coffee. When he would go to work, I would take a sip when it was like room temperature. And they drank like fucking Folgers and Sanka. Excuse me. Just fucking awful coffee. So that's why I never drank it until one night when we were shooting Old Dads. It was like the third day of shooting the movie, and somebody had a ambiguous test for fucking COVID, so they had to stay out in the car, and it was just the whole shoot at night was turning into a fucking nightmare. And what was supposed to take a certain amount of time was going to take like 1.5 times that, and I was fucking nodding off. And somebody got me a coffee, I don't know, cappuccino, and I had that, and it didn't really taste good, but it woke me up. And then that's when I got fucking hooked. So now I'm off that shit. I made my wife a decaf latte this morning, and I don't know. It's like being a junkie, you know what I mean? I was cooking up the fucking works, and it made me want to have another cup of coffee. I'm like, you gonna go back into that life again, Bill? I kind of like the life of no coffee, where in the afternoon I get tired like an old man, and then I just take a 20-minute nap, and I feel like $1 million because I've been, I almost said I was reading about this. I didn't read about it. I've just been hearing about all of this, that like if you don't get enough sleep, like you don't clear your brain, and like that's that clutter that ends up leading to cognitive issues as you get older, like dementia and Alzheimer's. I have no fucking idea. I have no idea if anything that I've said in the last 17 minutes is even remotely true, but it sounds good to say it. So that's what I'm going with. And that's it. Last I checked, my Red Sox was 78-78. Oh, win some, lose some. I still think it was a great season. We just got to get a couple of fucking things going on there, you know? And, I don't know, we will forge ahead. But I like this base group of hitters and fielders that we have. Just need to shore up the pitching a little bit. And I think, we got a great manager and all that. And I think we could be, a couple, 2-3 years, who knows? Maybe we could win another one. And I just love as a Red Sox fan that I believe that we could win another one. As opposed to fucking growing up thinking they were never going to win it. So anyways, as I mentioned, my lovely wife came down to the Comedy Store last night, which was fucking awesome. She came down for the first show. she didn't stay for the second show. I mean, she lives with me. I mean, how much can she fucking listen to one man talk? But anyway, I'm going to go see Francis Ford Coppola's new movie tomorrow. He self-financed it. So I think if you're a fucking American and you don't like corporations and these fucking tech nerds that are consolidating every business and just getting rid of jobs and keeping people's salaries for themselves so they can have these disgustingly huge fucking homes as people live under bridges, you know, if you want to support that, keep watching streamers, you know. But this guy put all his fucking money into this. And just like Costner, I think you should go out and you should fucking support these people that are doing this stuff outside of the normal system. That's just my 2 cents. All right? All right, let's read a little bit of the advertising here. Open phone. Speaking of which, my phone's fucked up right now. I can't figure out. It won't pick up any cellular signal unless I'm in my house. Have you tried shutting it off? Did you go into settings? Did you shut?
Welcome to Empire Love Story channel.